Hello everyone and welcome to day 29 of Inktoberfest. My name is Amanda Fitter and I'm going to be doing everything about archival inks. So I have this tag that I had created for day 3 of Inktoberfest where I used a stencil, some color hive inks, and some water to create this beautiful background. And I grabbed a rectangle die and I just cut out right in the center of my tag a little rectangle. And then I have a piece of acetate that I am going to go ahead and stamp a sentiment on. So I'm lining up my acetate. I'm just going to make a little mark where I need to cut it down. I don't want it to hang over the edge of the tag, but I also want to give myself plenty of room to glue it down onto the back of my tag. So I've trimmed it down and now I'm placing my sentiment. The sentiment is from A Wonderful World of Flowers stamp set that was designed by Eileen Hall. And I'm grabbing my Staz-On. This archival ink is waterproof, permanent. It does take a little bit of time to dry when you put it on any non-porous material. So you can use it on acetate or vellum or coasters, anything that's non-porous, and it will stay and it will be permanent. So I'm going to give that some time to dry, and I'm going to be careful as I'm handling it. Normally I would let it sit there and dry longer, but since I'm making a video, I'm going to go ahead and just be careful to not touch it. So I'm grabbing some super tape, and I'm going to place it all the way around the back of my tag where I want my acetate to stick. The super tape is really good when you're trying to hold down acetate because it's very strong. And since acetate is non-porous, it does not want to stick to things all the time. So the super tape is really good for holding that acetate in place. So once I've removed all the backing, I can go ahead and place my sentiment. Again, I'm being careful not to touch the ink. It could be dry at this point, but it's not worth it to find out. So I'm trying to get it lined up, and it's hard to see because I'm on a black background. So let me show you what it looks like. There we go, on white. So that's it for that tag, and now we're going to move on to the next one. This tag I also created on my other video that I did for Inktoberfest. I kind of did this galaxy background using different color hive inks and distress oxides. Mask the moon out and use water and a little bit of white distress ink to make some stars for my background. So I have the Seaside Silhouette stamp set and some Black Ranger archival ink. So once I get my stamp pretty well inked up, I am going to go ahead and stamp it on the bottom of my tag. And I'm really only getting the top of the image onto my tag. I also have a piece of vellum, and I chose a piece of vellum that was it's a scrap piece of vellum, but it was bigger than my tag. Because it's see-through, it's hard to tape it onto a tag. If you use double-sided tape, you'll be able to see through. If you use 3D foam squares, you'll be able to see them. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to grab a piece of vellum that's bigger than my tag so that I can fold it over the ends of my tag and tape it down, which I'll show you in a second here. So I have my sentiment, and I'm grabbing some archival ink. This is Faded Jeans, and I'm inking up my sentiment, and then I'm stamping it onto my vellum. I stamped it right in the center. So now I am going to trim my vellum down. I'm not going to trim off the ends, but I am going to trim off the bottom. I'm also being careful not to touch the stamped sentiment as it's probably still a little bit wet. Normally I would give it more time to dry, but for the video I'm going to just go ahead and be careful not to touch it. And I'm just going to fold over the ends of my vellum. And I could just use regular Scotch tape on the back, but my favorite tape of all is to use the super tape. So I'm going to get some super tape, and I'm going to use that instead of Scotch tape. So far you've seen that you can use archival ink on non-porous materials, such as acetate and vellum. So I'm about finished with this tag here, and you can see how gorgeous that looks. And so now I'm going to do my final tag, which is using watercolor with archival inks. So for this last tag, I'm using the Love, Hope, Strength stamp set. And I also have some archival inks and some Altenew watercolor markers. So I'm going to place my tag in my flower, and I'm going to use Dusty Concord archival ink as my outline for my flower. With archival inks, you can use watercolor with them, and it won't blend or bleed or anything. So what I'm going to do is I'm grabbing my Altenew watercolor markers, a paintbrush that has a pretty fine tip on it, some water, just spraying that water directly onto my work surface with my Mr. Perfect spray bottle. And I'm priming my flower with the water. I'm going to go section by section. So I'm just doing maybe like 7 or 8 petals here. I'm starting with the Midnight Violet on the inside of the flower, and then towards the end of the flower I'm using Rubellite. And then I'm going to go back through with my water brush and just mix the colors together in the center. I'm grabbing some more water and I'm going to work on my next set of petals. Again, I'm going to go with the Midnight Violet and then use my Rubellite at the ends. So I'm just going to continue doing that for the entire flower. You can also see that I had stamped a stem with some leaves earlier. I used fern green for the outline of the leaf, and then I used moss and limeade watercolor markers to color it in. So once this flower is finished, this tag will also be completed. Okay, so let's recap archival inks. They are solvent-based, waterproof, they work with watercolors, they're permanent, and they dry on non-porous surfaces. So here's a little recap of what we did in the video. We stamped on acetate with Staz-On archival ink. You could also use this ink on tiles, cork, glass, and fabric. We also stamped on vellum. Keep in mind that it does take a couple minutes for it to dry, so don't touch it right away. We also used archival inks with watercolors. You can use different colors or you could use black. There's no need to use embossing powder to set it. The ink is waterproof right away. And that's it for me, my friends. Again, I'm Amanda Fitter. You can find me at www.amandafitter.com or on Instagram at Crafty and Creative Vibes. Enjoy the rest of Inktoberfest. There's only a couple days left. Thank you all.